Hi, Accelerated Math 6-7 students. Welcome to our third video. I'm opening to the table of contents so that you can add our new lesson for today. Our new lesson for today is solving problems by finding equivalent ratios, and mine starts on page 12. So I am going to turn in my comp book to page 12. Hopefully you guys are able to get that written down and taken care of. So we're going to take a look over here at page 12 and begin our lesson. All right, so like I said, the name of our lesson is called Solving Problems by Finding Equivalent Ratios. Our goal for today is, today we are going to learn the difference between a part-to-part ratio and a part-to-total ratio. We will also continue working with equivalent ratios. The question that I want you to be thinking about is, what is the difference of a part-to-part ratio and a part-to-total ratio? We're going to go ahead and kick off today's lesson with a task right away, so I want you to be remembering your 3 reads process. The DMVs register cars and trucks with license plates. In August, there are 192 registrations purchased for cars and trucks. For every 5 cars registered, there were 7 trucks registered. Interesting. So it sounds like this task is about registrations for cars and trucks. Okay, so that's the first read. Second read. DMVs register cars and trucks with license plates. In August, there were 192 registrations. I think that's probably a key bit of information, or a quantity. 192 registrations purchased for cars and trucks. For every 5 cars registered, so 5 cars registered would be another quantity, there were 7 trucks registered, so that would be the other quantity. So 192 registrations, 5 cars registered, 7 trucks registered, those are the quantities that we're looking for. All right, one more read, and we're going to be looking for the relationship. DMVs register cars and trucks with license plates. In August, there were 192 registrations purchased for cars and trucks. So the relationship that I'm seeing already is that when you go to the DMV and you register a car or a truck, them together totals 192 registrations. The ratio that I'm seeing, or the ratio relationship, actually is right here. For every 5 cars registered, there were 7 trucks registered. So we already know the ratio relationship also. That's awesome. Okay, so now to get to what we're actually focusing on in this lesson, or learning about, is what we call a part-to-part ratio. So what we want to do, along with finding our quantities, is we want to identify the parts of the task. So we have cars and trucks are both vehicles. So we know that cars make up one part, trucks make up the other part, and cars and trucks together are vehicles, so vehicles represents our total in this task. Okay, so hopefully you guys are all understanding what that means. So a part-to-part ratio for this task would be 5 to 7, because we identified part, and what did we learn about the cars? 5 cars are registered for every 7 trucks registered. So we have 5 to 7 because we're comparing the part to part, and cars to trucks happen to be the part-to-part ratio that we're looking for. Okay, another one that you could do is you could say that a part-to-part ratio would be trucks to cars, and then that way you have to remember that order matters. So trucks is 7, so it would have to be 7 to 5, remembering that either way can be written, but they are not the same ratio. They are 2 different ratios because order does matter. Okay, so that's a part-to-part ratio. All right, moving on to the next one. So we have over here, again, our same title, Solving Problems by Finding Equivalent Ratios. Now we're going to talk about part-to-total ratio. So the part-to-total ratio is pretty simple because you just have to remember what makes up the parts and what makes up the totals. So in the task, the ratio would be 5 to 12, cars to total. Remember, the total is the vehicles, okay? So how many vehicles were there all together? Well, I did a little tape diagram that I want to just point to really quickly. I know it says something else, but this tape diagram really helps explain very carefully how we found 12. Because we know for cars there's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For trucks we know there's 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the question is, what would the total be? Well, all you have to do is count the spaces or add the ratio of 5 to the ratio of 7. Add those together and that gives you the total. So I have a total of 12 sections. So that's where that 12 comes from. That's the total. So if we're comparing cars to total, it would be 5 to 12. If we're comparing trucks to total, it would be 7 to 12. I hope that makes sense. I hope I didn't confuse you. Just remember, part to total. So pick a part, cars, pick a different part, trucks, and then show the ratio compared to the total for both. Okay? Not too bad. All right, so going back to the tape diagram, notice it says tape diagram for part to part, and we drew a tape that represents the cars. We drew a tape that represents the trucks. 5 cars, 7 trucks. The question is, how many equal sections are there? Any ideas? That is correct. There are 12. And the way we know is they have to be equal, so that means that they have to look the same. Same size, same shape, same value. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you are correct. There are 12 equal sections of each tape. If there were 192 vehicles registered, how can we use the tape diagram to determine the value of each section? So this whole tape diagram that we see right here equals 192. That's what that's saying. So if this whole tape diagram equals 192, how do we know what goes in each section of the tape? That's the question. So we're going to go back to this question. How many equal sections are there? Well, you all think, I believe, that you see 12. So if we know there's 12 sections, the question that I want you to be thinking about is, could we take all the vehicles registered, divide it by the 12 equal parts, and come up with the amount that goes in each one? And if you agree, then you are correct. That's exactly what we do. We take 192, because that's the total vehicles registered. We divide them by 12 because there's 12 sections in our tape. And when you do that, 192 divided by 12 actually works out perfectly. It's 16. So each section has to have 16 in it. So we go ahead, just like we've been practicing for the last couple of days, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, 16, remembering that this represents cars, this represents trucks, and we also need to remember that each section is the same size and same shape. So, since they're the same size and same shape, that's why we put 16 in all of them. Okay? So now your job is to figure out, now that we know how to fill it in, how many cars were registered. So we're looking for the actual amount of cars. You're going to write your answer right here. That will be one that you check on the board when we get there in the morning. How many trucks were registered? Same thing. You already know 16 is there, so you've got to figure out what the total number of trucks would be and put your answer right here. Okay? Pretty fun. I think you could be able to figure that one out. And we have one more practice on the next page. So I'm going to turn the page, and so are you, hopefully, and we'll do the last task. Now this task is pretty much going to be you guys on your own to see if you can figure it out. I will do some explaining to make sure that it makes sense, but it is pretty simple if you understand the concept. So this one, again, we have a new title, or a new page, so we have to put our current title on the new page. Solving problems by finding equivalent ratios. Okay? The task is, in September, the DMV shows that for every 14 non-commercial vehicles, there are 5 commercial vehicles. Now, some of you may be sitting at your chair watching this and going, I don't know what commercial vehicles are, and I don't know what non-commercial vehicles are. Well, non-commercial vehicles are like any vehicle that is not used for a company or a business. So it's like my car, it's like my truck, it's like my other car. So basically it's personal vehicles, anything that gets driven by anyone who is not working for a business. Commercial vehicles are exactly that. They are vehicles that are driven by companies. So for example, some of you might have seen the Stanley Steamer big yellow van that drives around. You might also see a FedEx truck before, or I'm trying to think of some other business vehicles. School buses are commercial vehicles or business vehicles. Let's see, UPS would be another one that we recognize all the time. Police cars are commercial vehicles. What else is another? Oh, the mountain transit bus that drives around town. That's a commercial vehicle. So commercial vehicles are any vehicles that are used by businesses. Non-commercial vehicles are all the other businesses, or all of the other vehicles. So it says in here, in September, the DMV shows that for every 14 non-commercial vehicles, there are 5 commercial vehicles. Out of all the vehicles registered, 108 more of them were non-commercial. Now, wait a minute. Let me read that. Okay. Out of all the vehicles registered, 108 more of them were non-commercial. So the question that we have to figure out is how many of each were registered. So we want to know the actual number of non-commercial registered and the actual number of commercial registered. So again, I'm going back to our favorite new tool, that tape diagram, and I've drawn it for you. Hopefully you recognize it. Non-commercial, the ratio was 14. Commercial, the ratio was 5. So we know our ratio is 14 to 5. So if you look at this tape, it represents that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 for non-commercial. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for commercial. Okay? So hopefully you're being able to see that. And now the tricky part, and they really were trying to trick you because they wanted to see if you could handle it. The tricky part is it says right here, if we go back and look at the quantities. So the quantities are 14 non-commercial, 5 commercial. Out of all the vehicles, so that really is a quantity, talking about all of them. Do we know all of them? No, we don't. Out of all the vehicles registered, 108 more of them were non-commercial. So they're telling us that 108 more of them were non-commercial. So they have to belong to the non-commercial. The key word in this sentence is 108 more of them. So the 108 cannot represent anything that non-commercial or commercial have in common. They can only represent the amount that they don't have in common because it says 108 more of them. This section on our tape is more than that. Do you all agree? Well, since this section is more than this section, that's where this 108 sits. So we now know that these tape sections right here represent 108 more. Okay, that doesn't mean you're adding 108 more to the whole tape diagram. It means that from this piece of tape section to this piece of tape section, 108 goes in there. So we go back to the idea of what we did on the previous page. How do we figure out what number goes in each section? That's what I want you to try. Okay, knowing that from here to here represents 108. So how do I know what is the numerical value that sits in each one of these pieces of tape? Because you've also got to remember, all the pieces of tape have to have the same number in it. What you're being able to do is you're being able to use this information right here and this number to figure out what goes in. Once you've figured out what goes in is in every tape section. So that means that once you figure that out, you can tell me how many of each vehicle were registered. So if the section above represents 108 more, how do we know the size of each section? That's your job this weekend, is to figure out what goes in in each section of the tape diagram. Remember, whatever number you put in there has to go in every single box. But you also have to remember that this section right here, add it all up from here to here, must equal 108. So how are you going to figure out what number sits in each one of those sections? Then the last thing that you're supposed to decide and figure out is how many of each kind of vehicle are there. So I want to know exactly how many non-commercial vehicles there were, and I want to know exactly how many commercial vehicles there were. All right, boys and girls, believe it or not, we are finished, okay? Let's go back really quick to our question of our lesson for today. What is the difference of a part-to-part ratio and a part-to-total ratio? You need to be able to answer that question as well, and it will be up on the board when we get back from school or back to school. So please make sure that you answer this question as well. What is the difference of a part-to-part ratio and a part-to-total ratio? Okay, and then the only other thing that you had to do was that you had to answer how many non-commercial vehicles and how many commercial vehicles there were. All right, kiddos, I hope that this was very helpful to you. Have a great